If you're watching this channel, it's because you don't enjoy watching the world squander what Christendom built, but you want to do your part. And chances are you've heard me mention a great means by doing just that. Email made by and for Catholics. Check out fidei.email. That's FIDEI.email. Built for Catholic individuals, families, organizations, and groups. They're private, secure, and of course, they're Catholic. And they're offering 2 months off on your first year for an annual subscription if you enter the coupon code Return to Tradition without spaces. That's the name of this channel, without spaces, at checkout. We have here, on good authority, it's been reported recently, without any fanfare, that a highly influential cardinal at the synod and after has been telling people that the church has to basically ignore its own teachings on the James Martin sin. Not a new thing for some of these to say, but this is a synod cardinal, a very influential place. He's the successor to Cardinal Zen in Hong Kong, Cardinal Stephen Chow. He is a voice they are listening to very closely, part of because of the deal with that country, but he has become kind of an all-star on the Bergoglian side of things. And now he is just openly telling people that the church basically got it wrong on this basic, fundamental moral question. I don't know where he gets this idea from, unless, of course, this is an issue that is particularly and peculiarly near and dear to his own heart. I'm not saying that necessarily about him, but you get enough priests and bishops who take this position, you start to ask some very unpleasant questions as hypotheticals. And that's what we're dealing with here. But he's openly talking about setting aside what the church teaches us to accompany other people, to dialogue with them, to kumbaya, group hug, and all of that. Synodality. Again, you begin to see how the paying lip service to the teaching of the church, but putting that aside in the name of making people feel better about themselves, leads to essentially putting aside the teaching of the church itself, because you will tend to practice what you believe. You can pay lip service to things all you want, but if you aren't actually at least attempting to do what you say you believe, then you probably don't actually believe what you're saying. So here we go to Outreach, because of course it's from Outreach, with this headline, Cardinal Chow, what I learned listening to the James Martin crowd during the synod. Yeah. We're not familiar with Outreach. They're an organization run by James Martin to promote that sin that he just finds so fascinating. James Martin spends an awful lot of time thinking about promoting a sin that cries out to heaven for vengeance. He spends an awful lot of time on that for a priest. And he's not doing it in a way of, hey, this is a sin that you should avoid and walk away from that. He doesn't do it that way. What he does is try to make the church, in practice, change what the church teaches, while paying lip service to what the church actually teaches. Because remember, if you don't practice what you preach, if you don't practice what you profess to believe, then you probably aren't really believing it. Something to keep in mind here. So we go here to the article for what this bishop wants us to understand about the church. Quote, if someone tells you she only wants to be part of your community, that she wants to stay as a member of the community and contribute whatever she has as long as she lives, what she wants from your community is to welcome anyone who sincerely wants to join, especially those coming from the social margins. Will you not listen to her? Will you reject her? What will you say to her? I guess that unless she is absolutely obnoxious to you or appears to be a terrible liar, you will not reject her or turn down her request. You will likely listen to her, at least give her a chance to prove her worth. Why wouldn't you? But will you say no if she tells you that she's a member of the James Martin crowd? Will you reject her request without hesitation? Will you not want to listen to her? If so, why will you do that? On October 8th, a fellow Jesuit invited me to attend a sharing session composed of a few individuals from that crowd. The session took place in Rome at lunchtime outside the Synod Assembly. Although it was not an official function of the Synod, I decided to accept the invitation since the session was about to listen to my fellow Catholics, who happened to be some on the margins groups related to their interests in the flesh. Besides, they encountered difficulties in securing members of the hierarchy to lend them their ears. Yeah, I wonder why that was. Listening is said to be the first act of a synodal church. If we're serious about developing our church into a synodal church, listening to different social groups, including those with whom we might have a hard time identifying ourselves, is mandatory. Prejudices, ignorance, fears, and hate actually reflect our unwillingness to engage in real listening and soul searching, especially to those voices which are deemed erroneous or make us feel deeply uneasy. Will these voices destabilize our beliefs or arouse our inner fears and anxieties? For one can say, if I go to this listening session of the James Martin crowd, what will be my friends and congregation? What will they think of me? I'm not these people. I already know what they are going to say. Why waste my time over them? I can tell them that they are simply wrong and sinful. I do not want them mistakenly thinking that the church or I endorse their sinful behavior. There are more reasons one can provide to justify one's own decision not to engage in listening. This is really nothing new in human history or our church. But I'm grateful that I attended the session and even led the opening prayer, which was an assurance that the church, which should reflect the communion and love of the Holy Trinity, cares for and loves the James Martin crowd, even though not everyone in the church does. And I'm sorry to say that some Catholics even despise these sisters and brothers of ours. End quote. Okay, thank you, Cardinal. Notice there's no acknowledgement of the church's teaching, the sin required to be engaged in, to be part of that community in question, community, is condemned by the church, that it says that it cries out to heaven for justice or vengeance, depending on your translation. And that is not acceptable under any circumstances. There are certain sins that cry out to heaven for justice, and that one is among them. Notice instead that the teaching of the church is sacrificed on the altar of synodality. Again, recently, the news of the Mayan rite of Mass and other things all hinge on synodality. I recently told you that the synodal church will have a James Martin face. It will also have a Father Anne face, if you're familiar with Father Anne. This is an activist woman who got herself ordained a Catholic priest, in quotes, and is an activist for these kind of things. It gets feeded by the media, the secular media. They give interviews to her, all this other stuff. It will have that face. It will have the James Martin face. The one thing it won't have is the face of Jesus Christ. They are kicking him out of this ape church that they are building, because the truth is put aside, even if it is acknowledged with a few words, and the practice of being nice to each other is the key element here. Francis speaks a great game about universal human fraternity. He had a document in the last 2 years that used the rallying cry of the French Revolution in the document as a positive thing. When they tell you who they are, believe them. We go back to this cardinal so you can see what he's saying here, because this is all fits together. He says, what impressed me at that session were some simple messages from the panelists. Why do you want to remain in the Catholic Church? Because I belong. The Catholic Church is my family. I am here to stay. I want to have my funeral in the Catholic Church. Again, no reference to Jesus, to the sacraments, to anything that a Catholic would actually say for why do you want to be in the Catholic Church? What do you want from the church? Let us join this so that we can serve. I'm just an old woman. I only want to contribute to my community. What would you like to tell the delegates at the synod? I am a medical doctor. I took an oath when I became a doctor. I will say the same to the delegates. Do no harm. Get to know the real people who are forced to hide behind a facade because of the church. Are these remarks and appeals too much or too threatening? I think it would depend on how one was listening. As for myself, these are simple, personal, and sincere messages, neither aggressive, provocative, nor bitterly blaming the church. At least I did not detect such tones when I was listening. In fact, I would say that the panelists were sincere and respectful towards the church, and their tone carried hope. End quote. He says there that it's not blaming the church, but if you look right on the screen there, that they're essentially to hide behind a facade because of the church. Yes, they were blaming the church, that they couldn't have their sins accepted by the world. They have to hide and cannot live the way they believe God made them, to live a life of sin according to the word of God and his church, because of the church. It's the church's fault, you see. So yes, they were very much blaming the church. That is how all of this fits together. So I'm curious, what do you have to say about all this in the comments? I'll go turn here to the comments here, but first I want to show you again this. A blaming of the church as the church for these sins. That they feel unwelcome, they feel unable to live their lives because of the church. That is what we see here. We do not have any real pushback from a cardinal of the church on this. All right, folks. Thanks very much for tuning in today. As always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.